I think I should check this in. Okay, so let's look at another example. So now we're like, okay, so let's see here. We have val2 equals, well, just some value, right? No spaces here. Val2 some value. And then we're like, well, let's try to use that variable, right? So we're like use, I guess for now we'll say outside variable, and then we're like print val2. Okay, so use outside variable. I'll rename it a little bit. So let's go here, void use, no parameters, and let's clear this piece here. Run. Value 5 right there. So let's go look at the code. So what do we do? So we created this variable outside the function, right? So it's not part of hello world. How do we know it's not part of hello world? The indentation, right? So hello world ends here. This one is left in is all the way to the beginning, so it's not part of hello world. It's not part of use outside variable either. It's its own variable, right? And these ones are actually not good to use, right? They're known as global variables, and I'll show you what's going on in memory for those. So we go global, and let's go copy this, and let's go to understand what's going on there. So we add a new page. Okay, so we have memory, and the computer has different types of memory. So the most common one we always deal with is stack. So we know that we will get, I'll just say use global ... So this one's loaded onto memory. And actually it doesn't have any function variables, right? So if we go look at the code, we do not create any variables in here. What does that mean? We don't create any variable like we do here. We just say, hey, print val2, and val2 was created outside the function. Okay, so in essence it qualifies as a global variable. So where would it reside in memory? Well, in stack? No, it won't be on stack. Like I said, programs have different memory, so then there's a special place for globals, and then we can say, oh, so this guy is here. So val2 would be here with value 5. So val2. Okay, so it's not on the stack, meaning when we create it, it'll stay in global memory for a while. So we're like, what does that mean? So let's create a new function that uses the same variable. We're like, well, why did we create a new function? Like, we name it _1 so that it can be differentiated, right? So what happens? So we go here, and we go here. Oops. And let's run it. So we go here. Void function. Oh, okay, use outside variable. what did I do? Oh, and rename them, right? So it's global and global. So global and global, because that's what we are working with, global variables. So let's run it again. So notice both functions can access 5. So that helps us understand that, hey, we're not creating the variable here or here, but here. However, both functions can access that variable, meaning when the function loads and unloads, it's not affecting or removing the global variable. And the reasoning for that is it's in a different block of memory. Our functions know how to access that block of memory. Okay, so that's what's happening there. Question here?
Sir, in order for the variable to be local, does it to be need to be declared inside the function, def function?
Yes. Yeah, because if you're like, wait, what's the difference between this diagram here and the previous one? The ones with local variables, their variables are in their block of memory, right? Like val in hello world. So let me make sure that you see val is created inside the function, so it's a local function variable. So in the diagram, we denote that here, right? It's in the memory block that was granted to hello world. Use global variable 1 and use global variable 1. They do not create local function variables. They are using a global variable that's created before the function runs. So then they just go and reference that memory location to get the value 5 and display it to screen for us.
You said not to use global variables, right?
It's not recommended because,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, usually programmers use them, like, for example, like for the federal tax rate, for some value that we know is hardly never going to change, like pi or the federal tax rate, the state tax rates, stuff like that, that hardly ever changes. The issue with variables, the way Python implements them, is that they can be overwritten, and we'll see. And if, like, say we say the federal tax rate is 8%, right? Whatever, but then Python uses it like kind of like the honor system. It's kind of like if a variable is global, capitalize it, and that tells other programmers in the future and even yourself, like, don't change this value. The problem is that if something can be done by humans, then humans are going to change it, right? So that's why it's not recommended.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. In other languages, you have like what's known as a read-only variable. Like, so once the program starts running, you cannot modify that in code or anything, right? Python, for some reason, doesn't use that concept. But for now, let's go and look at more code. So we go here, and let's go and be, okay, so let's say def change global variable. So let's try to change global variable. And this one's kind of tricky. So we'll have to do some creative stuff, right? So we'll say val2 equals 10. Print val2. And then we have to go to main and let me comment that piece out. Void functions dot change global variable. Let me see if I can print void control space void functions dot. I think it connects as val2. Okay. Okay, so I'm trying to change the global variable and change global variable here, and then I'm printing it, and then here I'm displaying it, right? So clear. Let's see, run. So notice we have value 10, but the global variable is still, we'll say global here. That way it can make more sense, right? And then here we'll say local. So we go back here and we're like, okay, let's run this piece. So notice to Python, it's still two different variables, even though to us it's kind of like, hey, wait a minute, like val2 should be val2. But now that we're getting an understanding of stack memory, we can diagram this code and understand what's going on. So I'll copy just the first two statements and we'll create a new diagram here. So we'll go here. So from that title, we already know, oh, so this one created a local function, a local variable, and then the global variable still exists. But if we diagram it, that'll give us a better idea of what's going on. So we're stack, and then we know that global. So here we had val2 equals 5, right? So let's diagram that one. That one goes here, value 5. I run main, and main, I'm like, hey, call the function change global variable. That one's loaded onto memory, so change global loaded onto memory, right? So that one's loaded onto memory. It gets memory blocks. And one of its variables is val2. So val2 is there with value 10. So when we printed this one here in the function, we get 10. And then when we print in main, it's getting the global variable value 5. But again, it's once we see this in an image, it's hopefully better to understand, like, oh, now I know like what's going on. Yeah, so yeah, that's a good example as to how we can get confused, right, with variables, right? Maybe our test cases like produce the good results, but then like in code, when we start merging code with like hundreds and thousands of lines of code, it's very easy to like get lost with the global variables, right? That's why it's kind of like stay away from them, or you're gonna have like a lot of issues. So now the question is, well, how do we use? What if I want to use this variable in a function, right? So maybe here, instead of change, I'll say try. We try to change, and we know we couldn't change it, right? It created a new variable. Oops, underscore y. Oops, y underscore y underscore. And let me go in main and make sure I change it, otherwise my program will crash. So right here, try underscore. Okay. We go back here and we're like, well, now, like, well, I want to use a global variable, right? So now we'll name it change, right? So we're like, okay, let's create another function. Enter, backspace, def, change global variable. No parameters, because we want to see if we can modify this variable's value. So we come back. And we can do that as long as we remember to say, hey, I want to reference val2. So when I do that, then I'm telling Python, hey, I know there's a global variable in the global memory. I want to use it in this piece here. So then I'm like val2 equals 10. So I can print the value here just to see it, and then reprint the value in main, right? So now I go here, void functions, and now here we say change, right? So change global variable value, and let's see what we get. So let me clear, and let's run it. So we run, and notice now, like, we get 10 and 10. So we were able to affect or change the value of the variable by using the keyword global. Okay, so let me go and diagram this one so that we can understand what's going on. So we go here, and we can say so we can see that, and then we can create our memory block here and get an understanding of why that's the case. So we go to stack, and then we know we have this special memory for global variable values, and we had val2 equals 5, right? So that's our global. So we diagram that one. It goes here, value 5. And then we load change global variable onto memory. So it's loaded change. So this one's loaded, right? But no vals are here because we didn't say like create a variable. We're just like, this statement here says global val2. In essence, we're telling Python, hey, like I'm going to use the global variable val2. So when I say val2 equals 10, instead of creating a local function variable here, Python's like, no, okay, the val2. So this one change the value to 10. So now like we're using the global variable and not a local function variable. Questions here?
So if you change the global value by saying global val and then setting it equal to another value, does that change value carry through after, or does it just go back to 5 after if you write another function?
No, it carries through, right? So let's use global variable, right? So here, like we were demonstrating that the value changed. But then we're like, well, I mean, let's try to use it from a function. So use global variable, and we can run that piece. So 10, 10, 10, right? So what's happening here? Okay, let's start from the beginning. Create a global variable, val2 equals 5. Okay, so it's created. Change global variable. Okay, so let's go here. Where's that? It's right here. So we're like, okay, we want to change it. How do we do that? We tell Python global val2. That tells Python, I want to work with this variable here. I know it's global, but I want to work with it within my function. So when I'm saying val2 equals 10, I'm affecting this variable. I'm changing the value. I just do this here just to show you that it did change. And then we access it two different ways. Directly by using void functions val2, and then within a function, use global variable. Use global variable. All it does is print val2, which is this variable here. So the change persists across function calls. Why does it stay? Because we affected the original memory block from 5 to 10. So any function that uses the global variable val2 will not get 5 anymore. We'll get the value 10, which is what we changed it to. Any other questions? Okay, no questions. So let's look at another example. Let me see here. Okay, so let's go to some code. What do we have? No parameter, no parameter, no parameter, no parameter. Okay, maybe now let's create a function with one parameter. And let's see what happens, right? So we're like, okay, def use global, or try to use global variable with a parameter, right? So we're like, okay, val2. And then I simply want to say val2 equals 10. Print, so here we say local val2. And let's go to main. So we don't want to use that one or this one, but we want to keep this one, right? What is this one doing? It's going to the void functions file and directly accessing the global variable val2, right? Why can we do that? Because it lives in that file, right? So that's how we can access the global variable in a different file. But let's see, look, what are we trying to do here? So we're like, okay, so now I want to go to void functions and I want to, and then I'm like, I'm going to send in some value 10, okay? And then I want to see what happens. So use global variable with param. Use global variable with param val2. Our global variable is val2. The question is this val2 the same as this val2 right here? Without running the code. Like, from the concept we've learned so far, do you all think it's the same val2 or a different val2?
I think they're different.
Okay. And let me
The first
see.
one is global.
Me too.
Okay. Okay, we have same with a query, kind of like same, and then two like they're different. But we can run the program and then we can draw the diagram to understand what's going on here. So let's go here. So local 10, global 5, so different. But why are they different? That's the question. So we go here and then we're like, input. So input, what are inputs? Parameters. What are parameters? Variables, okay? If it's a parameter that belongs to a function, then it only exists when the function is loaded. Kind of like a function local variable only exists when the function is loaded. It only makes sense that this parameter, which is also a variable, only exists when use global variable with param runs. So let's show that with a diagram. Okay, so let's see here. So we have that, and then we'll also write val2 up here to show that we have an existing global variable. And then let's diagram this one. So we know we have a global, so that one, hopefully by now you have a solid understanding that this one always goes here in global memory. And then we have a function that gets loaded, use global variable with param. That one gets loaded, so use. So let's point the arrow here to show that it's loaded. When a function is loaded, its parameters and function variables are loaded also. There's no local function variables here, but we have a parameter, which in essence is a variable. So this one has to be loaded, okay? So we're saying value 10, okay? However, we have to understand that once this function exits, then this block of memory is not usable by our program. So even if this value is in memory, our program cannot go and get that value, okay? So that's why we have output 10, because in here, in the example, I did print val2 within the function, so that's why we get 10. And then outside in main, I do print the global variable, so that's why we get 5. We have one variable, two variables, so two different variables, right? So if we go back and look at the code, we can trace it. So we're like, run the program. Python loads this code and it creates the global val2. In main, we're like, okay, I want to use the function use global variable with param. I'm going to send the value 10. Python's like, oh, okay. So val2, so this is value 10. So in essence, this is not doing anything, right? This val10 is just kind of like overriding val10. But I just put it there to give the illusion that it might modify the global variable, but it won't. So when we display val2, it's displaying the function version of val2, which is this one, 10. Our function exits, val2 is no longer available. Which val2 is no longer available? This val2 param, because it belongs to the function. So when it's removed from memory, it's not available to our program anymore. So when we say print global void functions.val2, then in essence we're telling Python, hey, go look for that global that I created in void functions and display it. So that's why down here we have value 10 first and value 5, because it's two different variables, right? Parameter in essence is a variable. Questions here?
I thought when you say global val2 and change the val2's value, I thought the value of the global variable changes to 10 from 5 and it stays.
Yeah.
So,
We're not using change global variable, we're using use global variable with param.
oh, okay. So
Right
if we
here,
just
use
have
global variable with param.
so if we just use a different function, like the value that we change, the global value that we change doesn't transfer over.
This is not global. That's what I'm trying to help students understand. This val2 is not global. It's a different variable than this val2.
Oh, okay.
So if we
Okay, I get it.
if we go back here, that's what I'm saying. Like, use global variable with param val2. Right here, you're loaded onto this block of memory with value 10. Global memory has val2 with value 5. Two different variables. So that's why we get output 10 and output 5. Even though here I'm just giving the illusion that, hey, I'm trying to modify the global variable, right? Just to make sure the students understand, like, oh, okay, so they're two different things. Questions?
Yeah, so that function for change global variable, so you have global val2.
Mm-hmm.
What is that called again? Is that like a Python library that
It's a
you're
keyword.
using?
It's a Python keyword, right?
Keyword. So is that the same that you used earlier for in numbers? Is that what you used earlier?
Okay, the second piece of the question, what was it?
So I think you used a previous one as well. You used in numbers, I think. Is that the same thing? Is that a keyword as well?
In numbers?
I think that's what you used earlier in the
Oh, for a different
previous
example, for for loops.
Okay. So yeah, in the for loops,
Yeah.
I think you use numbers, so is that the same thing, keyword?
I'm not sure. In is a keyword, right? But I think we're getting off topic here. Anything in blue here is we can assume it's a keyword. Like def is a keyword, global is a keyword.
Okay.
Meaning like it's a special word in Python. We cannot use it like to create a variable for ourselves. It's a reserved word, right? Keywords are reserved word.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, so let me stop here and